Okay,
We're live.
we are live. Welcome to the first episode of the Lobby Rats podcast, where we chat with inspiring individuals, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Todd Brooks, the owner of Brooks Burgers, one of the best burger joints in the U.S. according to TripAdvisor. Todd's known for his unique and innovative donut burger. We're excited to learn more about Todd's journey in the world of food and commitment to the famous Brooks Burgers.
Well, how's your day going, by the way?
My day's going fantastic.
That was great. All right. So, how'd you get started in the restauranting business?
Well, the restaurant business chose me. I didn't choose it. So, I was the troublemaker at school when I was young. So, anyways, I dropped out of school when I was 15 years old. Moved out of my house, had my own apartment, raised myself after that for the most part. So, the restaurant business was the only thing I was qualified for at the time. So I started as a dishwasher, and then got promoted busser, and then I was a cook, and then I cooked for a few years, and then I went and took some classes, and then I ended up landing my first chef's job by the time I was 20 years old.
Okay. Is that an executive chef?
No, it was a sous chef position. At a restaurant called Fedora Cafe. It's no longer there, but it was the place to be back then. A lot of famous people hung out there, and got to meet a lot of famous sports players that hung out there.
Yeah. Where was this?
This was in Kansas City.
Oh, Kansas
So like
City.
the Kansas City Royals, they used to come in all the time. George Brett, that was back when they won the World Series.
Oh,
George Brett was there all the time, and
Oh,
the Chiefs players would come in and out. So it was a cool gig for somebody that was young, and
Yeah. And how'd you move on from that? Did you make most of your money doing that to start your businesses, or what was like your first business ventures, you'd say?
Well, it took a long time to move up. So I'm pretty grumpy these days because the restaurant business is pretty hard. But I can't complain because it took really good care of my family. So I spent my time. My number one rule in life was I never said no. Anytime there was an opportunity, whether I thought I was ready for it, whether I thought I could do the job, or if I knew what I was doing, I just did it. I didn't say no.
Yeah.
So sometimes I took positions that I was completely unprepared for, and I was completely incompetent in doing. But that was also my education.
Yeah.
So I would spend 6 months doing a job, and I might not have been the best at it, but I also learned what to do and what not to do. So when I got to the next job, I was better prepared, and I just did that, and I did that over and over and over and over. And if you kind of think of it like a video game, and you keep collecting stuff, and then you get to the next challenge and keep collecting stuff and get to the next challenge. So that's what I did. And then I think the coolest job that I got was when I got to open and write the menu for Pierpont's at Union Station in Kansas City, which was like a super high-end seafood and steak place. And it was
You got to write the menu?
I did everything. I was the corporate chef of the company, but head chef of Pierpont's. So I wrote a lot of menus. I've probably opened in my lifetime. I've probably opened about 18 restaurants.
Wow.
Not that I owned them all. I opened them.
Okay.
From the kitchen side. But Pierpont's was awesome. I mean, it was one of the most beautiful restaurants you'll ever see. It's 3 stories inside of an old Union Station that they rehabbed, which was the train station hub in Kansas City that was obviously not used anymore. But they had to bring people in from England to redo all the woodwork and everything. So it was pretty cool. It was extremely prominent restaurant in Kansas City. So that's kind of where I took a big step forward in my career. Instead of just being a chef of a restaurant, I was chef of a really badass restaurant.
Right.
And we did a lot of badass food.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think helped me and made me successful was because I took the long way around instead of going to a famous hotshot Johnson & Wales or CIA of America, Culinary Institute of America, things like that.
Yeah.
I took the hard route and I learned everything myself, but I also had no guidelines and no rules. So I didn't have chefs standing over my shoulders telling me that I couldn't do that or don't do that or that doesn't make sense. I just did it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was, horrible. And then sometimes it was phenomenal, and people were like, "Where'd you come up with that idea?" And I was like, "I don't know, I just made it up." So a cool thing about the way that I was doing it was my guidelines were like out here instead of a lot of kids coming out of school where they were really tight.
Yeah.
You know, because I didn't know that there was guidelines. So I would make food that like a French chef would probably stick his nose up at and be like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
You know.
You wouldn't have done it any differently?
No, it's pretty cool. I mean, I feel like I missed out on a lot of things that the other kids were doing and stuff, but at the time I didn't know it, and I didn't care. I worked 80, 90 hours a week.
Yeah.
Took every opportunity that was given to me. And then, so the restaurant took care of me when, and I've got that crazy mind that never stops.
Yeah.
So, being busy is a good thing.
You always love doing it, right?
Yeah, I like to be creative. So the kitchen was very creative for me. If you stick me in an office to do paperwork, I'll go berserk. So, yes, I do. I always loved the business. It's you can do anything you want. And now that I own my own place, I can do anything I want.
Right.
Nobody can tell me I can't. So
Yeah. So it sounds like you took a lot of risks. Now, what would you say would be the biggest risk you took to get where you are?
I can tell you the biggest risk that we took when we. I had a very good job in Kansas City, and oversaw 9 restaurants. And then there was a fire at one of the restaurants that was kind of took down the company or part of the company. And we decided it was a good time to move because I was tired and working a lot, and a couple of people in my family had passed away. So we took literally everything that we owned and sold it. And I mean everything.
Wow.
We sold some of the kids' toys. We sold our car. Well, we had 2 cars. We sold one of them. Sold our house. Borrowed some money from my mom. Took everything, scratched it up into a little pile of money, and then we came down to Naples, and that was in 2010.
Wow.
So we came down here when we had no money, and we lived. There was 4 of us with my daughter and my son, and we lived in a little tiny house, and we had to share bedrooms because nobody could have their own room.
Yeah.
And we bought this place, which is Brooks Burgers. It was then known as Lindbergers.
Yeah, I remember that. I
Yeah,
always hear people
it was
talk
called
about that.
Lindbergers, but it was really dirty, and it was kind of an accident. So when we came down here, we were trying to buy a restaurant. It was a bistro, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was over at the corner of Pine Ridge and Airport Road. And I came ahead of my family, and we found out everything was fraudulent about the whole place. The lease wasn't real. The numbers that he was giving us on his sales and all that stuff, it wasn't real. And I found out this literally the day of closing. So all my money, the money that we scraped together, was trapped in an escrow account, and I couldn't get out of this deal because this guy was a jerk.
Yeah.
So we had to sue him to get our money back. Well, we ended up threatening to sue him, and then he gave the money back. And so I was here by myself. I was kind of down. I was kind of a little down on my luck and pissed off about the whole thing. And I was getting ready to head back to Kansas City, and I came into Lindbergers. And when I walked in, I looked around, and I was like, I was the only person here. But the owner said it was for sale, and I was like, who in God's earth would buy this?
Yeah.
And then a week later, I bought it. So it was kind of crazy. It was an accident that we ended up buying this business.
That was the best accident.
It was
Yeah.
a good accident. So we had to scrape it clean and start over for the most part. I mean, we redid everything, products used, menu. We had to clean the restaurant, redo the kitchen. But my wife came down, and when she saw it, dude, holy shit, she was pissed off at me. She walked in and she goes, "God, please tell me you didn't buy this." And I was like, "No, we bought it." And she was like, "Can you return it?" And I was like, "Nope." I said, "We're all in." So we were here, the first 2 years we were here, we were dirt poor. I mean, we had nothing. I rode a scooter to work that I bought for like $199.
Yeah.
And we lived in a tiny house that we rented for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
So that was by far the biggest risk. I mean, we gambled everything on it, but it was, the one thing that I found out, because people ask me all the time, they're like, they're like, how do you open a restaurant, or how do you do a business, or how do you how do you prepare for it? And I said, the only difference really between me and a lot of other people is I just did it. I pulled the trigger and said, the hell with it. I was like, we're going to go up in a ball of flames, or we're going to make some money, or, so that's always been my advice is don't hold back and take chances, because that's the only way that you're going to get anything done.
You only live once.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. So going back to when you were an executive chef, did you ever think that, was that ever your idea to was it always your idea to get to where you are today, or was it just by chance that you took a risk?
I don't know. I think in the beginning, I did it because I was young and I was making really good money for a person my age.
Yeah.
And it was also an exciting. I mean, dude, if you're 20 years old in the restaurant business back in the 80s,
but
in the early 90s, I mean, it was like a gigantic party.
Michelin star was it a thing there then?
Yeah, it was, and we weren't a Michelin star ranked restaurant. I think it became one eventually, but it was. But the restaurant business is crazy, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can think it in the restaurant business, it happened. It's not as much fun today as it was then, or maybe I just got older. But I can tell you, as a 20-year-old kid, it was, you worked from morning till night, and then you got like 2 hours sleep.
You got some interesting figures in that restaurant.
I have so many stories I could tell you. I couldn't even start. We had a time where on Thanksgiving Day, somebody brought a wild turkey. This is a fine dining restaurant.
Yeah.
They brought a wild turkey in on Thanksgiving Day and let it go in the restroom.
Oh my God.
And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I was so young, and the chef came out and was like, you got to come help me catch this turkey. And I was like, I ain't going in there with that turkey. He was like running around crazy.
Yeah. Did you cook it?
No, I don't know what he did with it. He caught it, and he was kind of a redneck hunter guy, so he probably took it out back and cut its head off. I don't know.
Probably.
You probably had a Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
It was a crazy place though. I mean, there was a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of extracurricular activities, and it was just for
as a chef, right? Because everybody wants to be with the chef.
It was a crazy place to work.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah. And what state would you say?
This was in Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City. Wow. Okay.
It's on the state line of Kansas and Missouri.
Yeah. What famous people would ever like visit your restaurants in that town?
Lots of sports people.
Sports.
Paul Newman. It was pretty cool. He was one of the biggest ones. I mean, Paul Newman was huge. I don't know if you're old enough to know who he is, but he was big. You probably just know him from his dressings in the public supermarkets.
Yeah. I bet you those were pretty big guys though, right? Because MLB and the Paul Newman is.
No, Paul Newman
Royals?
was an actor.
Oh,
famous actor. But we had lots of sports people that came in from the Chiefs and the Royals and stuff like that. And then we had you've heard of Happy Days, right? With Arthur Fonzarelli and all them.
Is it no? Actually, I thought
it was a sitcom from when I was young.
Oh,
but like you know who Henry Winkler is, right? He was in like The Waterboy, the coach at The Waterboy. Come on,
I don't know.
Oh, I remember him.
And anyways, he's old now, but Henry Winkler and all the people from that one show, they were all in there. I don't know if it was a play going on or something, but I got to meet all of them, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
And I got to work with some really awesome chefs. And because we did a lot of charity work, so we would do stuff with famous chefs that would come in and do special wine dinners and things like that. And I also got to try some pretty wild food. I mean, we ate lion, bear, elk. We had squirrel, rattlesnake, turtle. I mean, if you can name it and it was legal, we had it. And
what did lion taste like?
It was disgusting.
Oh yeah.
It tasted like greasy, spoiled pork.
I heard elk tastes like really good. When
Elk's
you smoke
good.
it.
Venison's okay depending on where it comes from. It picks up the flavor of whether it eats berries or grass and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it can be really gamey sometimes, and it can be really good sometimes. But lion was the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. It was not good. And to be honest with you, we weren't really sure what to do with it. Because we had never cooked lion before.
On a whole lion?
It was a leg of lion. It was massive.
Wow.
It was like a big
size
leg
of this
lion.
table, bro.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but this guy had hired us to do this wacky wine dinner, and he was charging like $300 or $400 a head to be there, and he wanted to impress people. So,
Who would you say were your like biggest inspirations growing up?
inspirations?
Not just entrepreneurs or
Did you have any
people,
mentors?
famous people, but chefs maybe.
All my mentors were people that I worked with, so they were usually the executive chefs of restaurants. Um, and uh, I had one executive chef that was very by the book, and I had one executive chef that was like way out of bounds. And so I kind of meshed the two together, and they probably those two chefs, Dan Palmer and Mike Peterson, are the two that probably created the type of chef that I became. So they were my mentors, and kind of goofy to say, but my mom was probably one person I looked up to. She's passed away now, but when she took care of my dad, who died from Huntington's for years and years and years. But during that time, she also went back when she was like, she was in her 50s, and went back and got her master's degree and finished that, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Holy cow.
So I would say my mom and the people that I worked with, and I don't know. It was kind of like a club when you were in the restaurant business back then. Everybody kind of took care of each other. So.
Oh, okay.
Did they like your creativeness?
Yeah, the creativeness is really what drove me. I mean, I ended up moving up the ladder at an extremely young age very quickly, and I was much more successful than a lot of chefs that came out of these big places because I already knew what reality was. I already knew that part of the job was the job sucked. Sometimes you had to peel 100 pounds peeling deveined shrimp. It was a nasty, crappy job.
Yeah.
So you had kids coming out of college that were like, what the hell is this? They thought they were going to be on TV. And I'm like, no, it's not that glamorous.
Not celebrity chef type.
Yeah.
And you being a chef, what would you say were your favorite dishes to cook? Not just like fine dining, but
I
type of
will never get sick of cooking steak.
steaks.
And I know it sounds simple, but there's so much you can do with it. It's just literally you can do almost anything with it. So seafood, I love seafood, but it's delicate. You know what I mean? So you have to pay attention to how you're cooking it a lot closer. You have to pay attention to you'll kill the flavor of the seafood if it's too delicate and you go too heavy, and then you just taste sauce.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I like steak because it's hearty. You can do light sauces. You can do easy things with it, but you can also do really, kind of rash, abrasive flavors, like big, bold flavors with it,
Mm-hmm.
And it's forgiving. So, and I grew up in Kansas. So, it's steak, 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 steak.
Right. Everything's steak. What would be your advice for aspiring chefs?
My advice for an aspiring chef is go be a line cook for 6 months before you go to school.
Yeah.
Because it is a grueling, time-consuming, hard job. And you can learn to love it, but it's fast-paced, and it's just hard. It's just hard. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people, I can't tell you how many people when I ran a corporation in Kansas City, and we would hire these talented chefs that came out of these schools, and they would last 3 months.
Yeah.
And they're like, this isn't for me. I don't want to do it.
Uh-huh.
I was like, that's because you were in this fancy ass school.
Exactly.
Having a good
It's not a
time.
real environment.
And I shouldn't say all of them were like that, but a lot. It's like you have to get a dose of reality.
Right.
That's my advice. Get a dose of reality of what the restaurant business is before you go spend 2 or 3 years going to culinary school.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever watch that documentary with Marco Pierre White, where he brought in all those chefs that work for his restaurant? It really showed like the real environment of the workplace, how intense it is.
I don't remember that
Those
one.
guys would be dropped like within 2 days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, one time cooking with no air conditioning. You ever have to experience that, or?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I have. I worked at a very fancy steakhouse. They had no air conditioning in the kitchen. It was like 110 degrees, and people quit left and right because they couldn't take
Right.
it.
Wow.
Have anyone faint in the workplace?
The what?
Have anyone faint?
Yeah. I can tell you a million stories. We had people that would faint. We had people that, they would just walk off. They'd quit in the middle of a shift because they're like, we couldn't take it. But it was a grueling, job, and I worked in when we were at the Fedora Cafe place. We were hand shoveling mesquite into these grills, and it had to be 120 degrees. Just your face just felt like it was sunburned all night long.
Oh wow.
And you had to move the charcoal around and create hot spots and cold spots and all that stuff. But it's it's also an art form. I mean, it was fun and we loved it. And
Did you ever get? Did you ever yourself get yelled at by any chefs? You know, it's
Yeah.
obviously. Right?
I got
And
yelled
there-
at and I got fired and rehired in the same day. And yeah, I'm not. Listen, I was great at what I did at the time, so I got a lot of privileges that other people didn't get because I didn't mind working the hours and I was really fast, and I could produce massive amounts of product. So literally, I would get fired from like a general manager, and that night the chef would call me and said, "You need to be back here tomorrow." And he's like, "Don't worry about what that guy said."
Yeah.
And I was like, "All right, I'll be back tomorrow." But I stuck a handle through a $3,000 lamp one time when I was mopping the floor. Got yelled at for that.
Oh.
Wow.
And then I pulled the grates out too far over the mesquite grill,
Oh.
and the whole grill, it probably weighed about, it had to be 1,000 pounds, but it hit the floor and cracked in half. And that was probably a $3,000 or $4,000 mistake.
Yeah.
But shit happens,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's weird.
How badly you get hurt in that job sometimes, right?
You
You
get
guys get
burned a
pretty
lot, and you
burnt,
get cut
yeah.
a lot. I
Yeah.
probably had stitches. When you begin, you get better at as you go along. But in the beginning, I was probably getting stitches once every 3 months or so.
Yeah.
Until you really learn how to handle a knife.
Uh-huh.
And after the first 6 months to a year, you don't feel your hands anymore. They're so burnt and they're so scarred up. You could pick up hot. I mean, I'm talking hot
Yeah.
skillets, and you could feel the heat, but your hands were so calloused from it and so burnt up that
Yeah. So I see executive chefs putting like when they put like steaks on a skillet and just put their hands right onto
oh yeah,
on the
I
pan.
could. You can almost dip your hands in a
yeah.
fryer when you're grabbing stuff out.
Right.
That's 350 degrees. You just don't feel it anymore.
You get used to it.
Absolutely. Well, your hands are just calloused and burnt.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Would you say in that time people were, at least in the documentary what I saw with Marco Pierre, those guys were like young French guys. They were doing it because they needed to survive, and some of them were trying to become executive chefs, just like the head chefs of this guy's restaurants. Were they? Would you say here in the United States they were doing it at that time to become head chefs, or just to survive? Would you say?
It was both. I mean, I was always competing with people that were just coming out of like the schools and stuff, and they just wanted to be chefs. That was their goal. I don't think I ever mentally told myself I want to be an executive chef. I just took it when I got it, and then I would take it the next one. And the first executive chef job where I got to write the whole menu for a new restaurant was at a restaurant called Abigail Rose, and the food was very good. It was probably a little unpolished is probably the best way to say it. But the food was really good. But I worked 89 hours a week, and the guy that was running the front of the house didn't know what he was doing, so it didn't matter. So the restaurant crashed and burned in like I think 11 months is all it lasted. But all the complaints always came from front of the house. It was never the back of the house. I don't think I did a bad job, but I was also only 23 years old, and I was trying to tell people that were 30 years old and 35 years old what to do, and they didn't like it. So that was a big learning curve for me, because you look at a 23-year-old and it's like, what's this punk know? Why is he
Right.
talking to me like this? What's he doing?
Uh-huh.
So there's a couple of times where I fired some people and I got punched in the face.
It's a lot of ego in the
Um,
kitchen.
The what?
A lot of ego in the kitchen.
Oh, it's all ego. It's like
Yeah.
being on a submarine. I mean, it's
Yeah.
if you can't handle it, you won't last long. But we, I remember firing a guy and he punched me square in the face.
Yeah, because it gets tense in there, I bet, with all the heat, and then you're cooking, and the guys are yelling at you, and you're getting
Well,
dishes
yeah,
sent
and
back.
again, like
Yeah.
it's a 23-year-old kid telling somebody that's 30 years old what
Uh-huh.
to do, or 40 years old what to do, and they're looking at you like you're crazy. And I'm just like, look, this is the way it is.
Oh.
And I didn't have any finesse back then. I was very
Oh.
raw. So with
Yeah.
that management style, management takes a lot of time. It takes
Right.
you years to learn that there's from point A to point B, there's 40 ways to get there. And if you think your way is the only way to get there, you're not going to be very good at a manager. So you have to be flexible. You have to learn what motivates people. Everybody's different. Every brain's different. The way people work, it's different. when you try to encourage somebody, some people just like the praise. Some people just want the money. Some people just want to learn.
Mhm.
You know, there's all these different things that you have to take into consideration. And the one analogy that I always like to use is you probably don't even know what this is. So, um, you have you ever changed a spark plug in a
No.
car or
Oh
anything?
yeah.
Okay, so like in the older engines and stuff, there were spark plugs and
On a plane engine, yeah, but not
and
a
they
car
still
engine.
use them on like little 2-cycle motorcycles, things like that. But
Huh.
they had a wrench, and you had to go buy this stupid wrench. It was like $30 or $40. That's the only thing that wrench could do was change the spark plug. And so my analogy was because people would always get upset, and they'd be like, "We have these employees because you have really good ones, mediocre ones, and you always have some that are kind of towards the bottom." You know, that need lots of coaching and lots of work and lots of help. But I looked at the people at the bottom like the wrench. And I was like, these people didn't understand that. I was like, even though this person can only do one thing and that's all they're doing, I go, what if he's not doing it? I go, then nothing else works, right? I was like, you can complain and complain and complain about this one employee, but he's doing the crappiest job in the kitchen that nobody wants to do.
Exactly.
Do you want to do it? No. I was like, that's my wrench.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing that one crappy job. You got to pay him to do it because nobody else wants to. So, anyways, I'm going on and on about that, but go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. What would you say would be your worst night ever, like in a restaurant?
I have
Dishes
about
sent
three
back.
or four of them.
Yeah.
3 or 4 that have been the worst night ever. It doesn't include any of them here. We've had bad days here where we've crashed and burned, and we've literally had to stop seating people because the kitchen was so messed up. But I can tell you that New Year's Eve 1999, going into the year 2000,
Oh, yeah.
was the worst, and it was 100% my fault. But it was the worst, one of the worst restaurant nights I've ever had in my life, because that was at Pierpont's, which was this prestigious, beautiful restaurant, and we were charging $500 a head to be there. And then in the main hall out in the front, they were doing a big, huge balloon drop and all this and indoor fireworks. It was an expensive event for high-end people from Kansas City to be at.
Yeah.
And we were booked on all 3 levels for the entire night. And I don't know what I did, but I wrote the specific menu for the night and didn't really take into consideration of how we were going to execute it on a time-wise. And we got just farther and farther and farther behind. So by like 2.5 hours into it, we were so far behind that they were literally coming in the kitchen and yelling at me. Like guests were coming in.
Wow.
And I was losing my shit. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, why can't we get this food out? And we were about 2 hours behind, and everything was on a reservation. Well, everybody was mad because they all wanted to be outside at the ball drop for midnight. Well, we were so far behind that people were still waiting that hadn't even sat. They were supposed to be there at 7, 2 hours later, and they haven't sat down. And I had the general manager screaming at me. I had servers screaming at me. Literally guests coming in screaming at me. And then, to make things worse, we were so far behind, like around midnight. There was 3 kitchens in this place, and I was in charge of all of them, right? So right at like 20 till midnight, the people all got up and went out to watch the ball drop or whatever. And so all of a sudden, we had 3 kitchens that had come to a complete halt. We were making food because we were so far behind.
Yeah.
So then they all went out, and all this food started backing up on me because we're putting up plates, but it's not going anywhere because they were pissed. They all got up and left. Then they all came back in after midnight for their food, but we didn't know where the food was going because they had all the tickets were missing and screwed up. So
it's terrible.
It was awful.
Oh.
I mean, I screwed it up, and I've never been yelled at that much in my entire life. And my wife came down at like midnight to like give me a Happy New Year's hug or something, and I was just like, I yelled at her, and she looked at me, and she's like, "Don't come home tonight." And I was like, "So yes, that was a bad night."
Yeah.
She did forgive me.
How'd that end up? Everybody just walked out, or you guys had to close the restaurant?
We had to buy a lot of food.
Okay.
Yeah. It cost the restaurant a lot of money. It was a bad night.
Wow.
And the worst part about it than the money is the reputation. You know, it tarnishes the reputation of something that's supposed to be prestigious. So that was a bad night.
Couldn't that have been avoided if just keeping the same menu? Because I feel like sometimes when you change the menu, you got to teach the chefs how to make this whole new menu, right? Before the night.
Well, yeah. In hindsight, I could have done it completely differently and fixed it all, but I needed a day. It was too late. Well, once we were into it, it was a disaster. And all the, we had 4 chefs working at the time, plus myself. So there's 5 chefs on, plus all your cooks and all your saute cooks, grill cooks, and everybody. And they're all looking at me like, what's wrong with, what's the answer here? And I was like, there's no answer. I was like, we're going to go down and struggle through this until it was like 2 in the morning before we got out before we got the food out. People were still there. They were furious.
Oh,
I bet you how tense it was the next morning. You'd come in, or the next night, the next day you had to come in.
I mean, you pull up your pants, go back to work, whatever. But that is the worst night. And it was 5 to 7 hours of pure helplessness.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what you did or how hard you worked. We could not make it work. We could not get it out. So it just couldn't stop. And then one time we did, this was not my fault, but we did a huge wedding in a grand hall. And this was also in that Union Station. And this was like for a wedding for like 500 people. And we were bringing everything from a catering facility that was like 3 blocks away. So we were doing everything via phone. I was like, listen, you got to fire the food. You got to do this. So anyways, they had called and they said, hey, the bride's on the way. And I'm like, at 5 o'clock. And I go, they're not supposed to be here till 7. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, they're going to skip doing pictures and they're coming right there. So I called down. I'm like, fire all the food, fire all the food. So we're shoving as much food we can in the ovens.
Yeah.
And then, so we get all the food and it's like, it's probably 20% cooked. 25, somewhere in there, and it was all filet mignon and sea bass, I think, was at the time, and they called back and they said the bride decided she's going to go do pictures, and I was like, what? I was like, holy shit! So I called back, I go, take all the food out, take all the food out, take all the food out. So they're taking all the food out because we didn't want it to be overcooked.
But now it's gonna sit there stale.
So it's sitting there and it's like kind of lukewarm. Well, sea bass, when you kind of warm it and then you kind of cool it and then try to recook it, it turns like to mush. Literally like
That's what
mush.
happened.
It was bad. And then and the steaks. So anyways, she goes, they're going to do the pictures. And they're like, and she goes, so you have about an hour and a half. And I was like, holy shit. I go, so we hit the brakes on everything. 10 minutes later, the bride shows up. And I was like, what is she doing here? They're like, so there was this big mess up between it was actually the wedding planner that messed all of it up. So then I was like, call back. I go, fire the food. And so we get all the food back in, and they sit down and they're doing everything kind of as they had choreographed it with the wedding planner. And and then they started getting mad. They're like, where's the food? And I'm like, it's gonna be like 45 minutes to an hour.
Right.
You told me, you called back and said hold everything. So we held everything. So then everybody starts yelling at me and screaming at me. So I got on the phone and I start yelling back at the chefs at the other place. They send all the food over. The food was like rare steaks, undercooked mushy fish.
Oh gosh.
And it was bad. We literally had blow torches that we were trying to hit the food with on the way out.
That's a sear.
And we ended up, I think it was probably like a $40,000 wedding, and I think we ended up having to give like $20,000 back. That was a pretty bad mistake.
hit.
But I still, to this day, it wasn't my fault.
Was this at the same place?
It was in the same building. There's a gigantic hall that goes down the center. It's beautiful. You can look up pictures of it online, and you'll see it. Look up Union Station, Kansas City. And but it was the same place, and we were representing the same restaurant, yes. It was kind of my fault because I should have just said, we're not going to give you your food for an hour because that's when it's going to be ready. But instead I panicked and said, send it.
Yeah.
So they sent it, and it wasn't cooked. And it just snowballed downhill from there. Those were probably 2 of my worst nights ever.
How about as an executive chef? Or just a line cook or chef yourself? Do you remember any of those nights?
Yeah, you always have bad nights.
Every day was a bad night.
So we had one night. I was very young, and I don't condone this, but we had been out partying all night.
Yeah.
And so I never missed shifts, ever.
Yeah.
Never called in. I was never late, never anything. Anyways, I came into work, and I was so hungover. I mean, I couldn't have been 20 or 21 years old. And I would throw up in the garbage can. I'd go wash my hands and get back to work. I'd go throw up in the garbage can. I'd go wash my hands and get back to work. And I threw up for like 3 hours because I was so hungover. And I wanted that day to be over with so bad. But I never missed a shift.
Yeah.
Never. Never called in. I was like the best as far as like employees showing up and being on time that you could have.
Mhm.
But that was a pretty rough day.
What would you say have been the biggest hits to your business,
You mean financially?
financially and um, customer related? I'd say.
Um, Financially, it's easy. I mean, you can think back. Obviously, coronavirus was a pretty big hit. Um, One of the things that happened to me was a very good friend of mine embezzled a lot of money from our company,
Hmm.
and that hurt me because I mentally was not prepared for that. I just couldn't fathom why or how or why this person would do it because they were a very good friend of mine. So
Yeah.
that was one of the big things that was kind of an unseen thing that really it took me like 3 to 6 months to get back to normal
Mhm.
because I was so hurt from it, and financially hurt, but also just as a from a friend standpoint. Um, but I tell you what, the worst thing now is right now is the worst thing is that for whatever reason, I'm not going to single out you or your generation, but their people don't show up on time to work. They call into work all the time. It's hard to find good employees, and
Call off.
everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone's calling
the,
off now.
the work ethic from 25 years ago to now is so bad. And I
Mhm.
shouldn't throw everybody in that basket because they don't deserve that because there's good people out there. But this is the worst that I have ever seen it
Yeah.
as far as trying to find great employees that show up. We have really good, solid employees here, but it's surrounded by people that come and go constantly.
I just don't think there's the same culture. I think that's a big part of it. Of
Yeah.
parents
Well,
encouraging their.
we had a pretty big or a pretty large amount of time where everything was pretty damn great
Yeah.
in America. You know what I mean?
Right.
Financially, and we weren't at war. I mean, we had wars, but people didn't see them because they weren't part of them. They're overseas, and so a lot of people just were very content,
Mhm.
and fat and happy, and people just got spoiled.
Yeah.
I mean, I got spoiled. I mean, it's
Betcha.
not, you get used to it after a while. You get out of touch with it. And sometimes it's just like when I have a cook not show up and I have to go back and I have to cook on a busy night back there. And I'm like, holy shit, I forgot how hard this is.
Yeah.
And then it's a reminder, it kicks me back into gear. And it's like, you got to appreciate your people. Because I was like, it's a hard ass job.
Yeah.
You pump out 350 hamburgers in 4 hours and expect to get everything right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's makes you appreciate them.
Definitely really hard to find hard workers nowadays.
It's hard to find hard workers, and I truly wish, I don't want to get political on you, but I wish that they would let the immigrants. If you're going to let people come into the country, you should be letting them work.
Right.
Yeah.
Why are you letting millions of people coming in, and you're not giving them a number?
And live off government benefits, right? Yeah.
Well, just let them work. Let them be
Yeah.
a part of the solution.
Exactly.
Let them be a part of, give them a card, take their fingerprints, and let them work. And then when their court date comes up or whatever the process is, I don't know anything about it, so I'm not a professional on it. I just don't understand why would you let all these people in and not let them work?
Uh-huh.
What happens to idle hands? People get in trouble, right?
Mhm.
It's like, but if you're working, and a lot of these people coming over are just good people that just want a better life. They just want to work.
Yeah.
And they want to send money back home and to their family. They can't, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I think our government right now is screwing up everything for a lot of people in the country. So
Yeah, man. A lot of them they work hard when they get here, and they have to do a lot of hard jobs. But excluding that, do you think it's more of a culture issue, a pay issue, or just a generational thing?
I think everybody got fat and spoiled.
Yeah.
Work from home. Everybody went home and was like, holy shit.
So the pandemic.
They
I
were
blame
like-
technology.
They were like, well, technology's got a huge part of it, but people went home for a year. I mean, think about how long Corona went on for,
Year,
the virus, right? For a solid year, they were sitting at home, whether they were working from home or not. And
Yeah.
then when it came time to go back to work, they're like, I don't want
Nobody.
to go back to work.
Yeah.
They're like, this was nice. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I was with my family, or I got to do stuff. It was, it was an easier lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the restaurant business took a huge hit. All the employees that were laid off, and they felt like they got screwed over when they left.
Mhm.
And they were like, why do I want to go back to that job? And they went and found other jobs, and they were like, holy crap, this is much better. You know,
Yeah.
you look at Amazon and the delivery people and all that stuff, and they were making the same or better money, and they could do it and make less or more money with less hours. That's people weren't coming back.
Yeah. I think it's the American mindset that's just changed from really of working long hours for your money to now. I mean, these guys for a whole year, like you said, were getting stimulus checks,
Yeah.
from the government to sit at home.
Well, not just not the money, but also think of the power of what you're doing right here.
Exactly.
This didn't exist. There was no internet when I was growing up. It didn't exist. You couldn't. I mean, it gives every person in America a platform to spew anything they want to put out there. I mean, you guys are all nice kids, and young men, but you can say and do anything you want. You can make stuff up. It doesn't even have to be true.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So the internet's just full of I mean, think of the stuff that's out there. Anything you can dream, you can go on the internet and find now. And some of it is stuff that you're not supposed to see until you're 20 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old. And the violence and
It's a big problem too.
it gives anybody a platform to talk, which fortunately I feel like there's people in the world that just shouldn't talk. So it's brought a lot of good, but it's also brought a lot of bad. Technology and the internet and the social media platforms have literally changed the entire world.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really just have like the whole world in your hands.
Yeah.
Everything.
Some of it's helped your business, but at the same time, like you were telling us, you got that phone caddy, so people can actually, focus on conversations now. Because everybody with their phones, they sit down at a table, and the first thing they do is take out their phones, not look people in the eyes and talk to them.
They're not even talking to them.
Yeah.
Need a
We
little
go
bit
out
of
to a nice
communication.
dinner, $200 dinner, and my son's sitting
Yeah.
there like this staring at a phone. I'm like,
And even
look around you. We're in this beautiful restaurant.
exactly.
We've got phenomenal food, all these things that you should be appreciating, and it's like you're tapping on a phone.
And the thing is, even if they're not on their phones, they're just not there. You can tell. On some of them, you can tell.
Yeah,
Because,
desocializes people too, though. I mean,
Yeah.
people look at it, and you look at it, and you're like, that's not their real life. It's
Yeah.
40 pictures of the greatest things that's ever happened to them. I go, why aren't they sending you the pictures of the 30 bad things?
Right.
Some do, I guess, but it's just a way to put out a fake facade of yourself. It's not the real you. Everybody's got good and bad in them.
exactly.
But through the internet, you don't have to show them
Right.
the bad. You just show them the good stuff.
Exactly. They only post the best parts of their life. So if you don't see the
Well, yeah.
the hard parts
How
of
many likes
everything they
am I
had to
gonna
go
get?
through, yeah,
Everybody, just people, and some
Yeah.
people sit at home and they feel like that nobody likes them,
Yeah.
because they're not getting like. I'm like, these people don't even know you. I know. I've heard kids talk about their like friends. I'm not gonna mention their names, but friends of like my sons and stuff like that are like, I've been dating this girl for 3 months. I was like, where's she? And she's like, well, we've never really gone on a date. I was like, what do you
crazy.
mean dating? She's like, well, we're on whatever platform. And I'm like, that's not
It's
dating.
not even real. It's not even real.
Yeah, I go, you've never even met the girl yet.
Yeah.
And she can say whatever she wants. I mean, you've seen the show Catfishing, right?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
long
I mean,
yeah.
distance.
I'm like, dude, you don't even know if that's her. It's crazy. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big. I have a social media account, and sometimes I post on it, but it's pretty rare. Maybe every. And I use it for more communicating with my kids. Sending up pictures and things like that. Stuff that is important to me than I do.
And it's a thing with young entrepreneurs as well, is that they're seeing these big influencers or entrepreneurs on Instagram. They're always seeing these best parts, like almost they make it seem on Instagram or any social media that they went from 0 to nothing in the span of like 2 or 3 years. When in reality, I mean, these guys have really worked. They just haven't posted about any of that. They only posted the best aspects. From 0, you don't see everything in between.
I'm dumbfounded by it.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it and these people that are making millions and millions of dollars by doing the dumbest stuff that they can do. There's one of them, you probably know who it is. I don't know who it is, but James shows it to me, and it's like the guy goes out and he'll buy like a $1 million Ferrari and like go crash it.
Oh,
Oh,
Whistle and
yeah.
Diesel.
And, and like everybody watches it. And the
Yeah.
guy makes another $2
Oh,
million,
yeah.
so he goes buys
Everything.
another. And I'm like, you're paying to see this?
Yeah.
I was like, this is
Look
unbelievable.
at Mr. Beast. I mean, he spends about like 2-3 million per video, and he makes it back double.
That's what I'm saying. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's the dumber you get, the more money you can make or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's it's
It's a
smart.
weird
It's smart of them, but it's useless content to whoever's watching it. But they're making money, so good
Yeah,
for
and
them.
that doesn't bother me. What bothers me about the technology is the exposure to very young minds of things that people shouldn't be exposed to.
Right, right.
Explicit violence and explicit sex and explicit things that just should not be on the plate for a 10-year-old,
not natural.
12-year-old, or 15-year-old. You know.
Yeah.
So they're not old enough to understand it and to realize the bad side of it. You know?
Right. It's become desensitized to everything.
Absolutely.
Seen 5-year-olds seeing that stuff on TikTok and everything.
Yeah.
Awful.
TikTok needs to go away.
It does.
Yeah. They're trying to pass that bill now. But
I hope it
apparently
passes.
it's not only supposed to take off TikTok, it's also going to take away some of our rights, apparently. It's same thing with the Patriot Act after 9/11. I'm not sure if you've heard about that.
Well, listen, when it comes to things that affect everybody or that affects the security and safety of people, you have to have some sort of oversight. And, that's where people get confused between what's a freedom of speech. Freedom of speech to me doesn't mean that you get to say anything in the world you want, right?
Right.
I mean, you can't harass and badger people and hate people into the ground. I mean, that's not freedom of speech. I was like, you have to have some protections that are out there for people. So we've gotten to this huge, gigantic point of ambiguity of, what's right, what's wrong, what's freedom of speech, what's too much government control, what's too much big government. I mean, I hate big government getting involved with things, but you still have to protect kids. You gotta let kids grow up,
Mm-hmm.
And right now, kids are growing up at the age of 5 and 8 and 9 years old, and they're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I
feel it's it's not only a thing about data privacy as well. It's what you said, but as well the big factor as well is that these companies, when not only do they track you and they sell your data and they're making off, when anything is free, you're the I forgot what it was called. It was
there's nothing's free.
yeah, nothing's free. You're always
You're paying a price.
You're always
somewhere.
paying a price. So it's either your data, or you're giving them money, and even still, they still
Or
track
they're
you.
influencing you to be a way some
Exactly.
people want to be. I mean, everybody knows that other countries are influencing our social media because we don't limit it. Like, you look at China. China they completely control what their people see. I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm just saying they control what comes in
Right.
and out of the internet, and we just
And-
let everybody look at anything and do anything. And there's no consequences
Yeah.
for people out there that are doing bad stuff.
And
Yeah.
frankly, the fact that they're doing that, actually, I'm surprised is what's like. There, if you see some videos of their youth, it almost looks like they're being raised better than some of the young people here in the United States, which is crazy.
Yeah, they certainly raise them with more controls around them, and I don't want to be in a communist country. Don't get me wrong.
No, yeah,
Whatsoever. I appreciate the freedom, but
Right.
there's you reach a point where what's freedom and what's abuse of everything that's what I mean. It just doesn't make sense
Yeah.
anymore. So, anyways, that's politics. I hate politics.
yeah. Well, back to the restaurant business. What would be some of your best nights here, actually, in Brooks Burgers?
I think the best nights I ever had was when I used to do like wine dinners, and that was really back more in Kansas City because when I was an executive chef and we were cooking and I was creative, like we got to do really fun, cool food. So we would go out and create. We'd charge $200, $300 a person for these people to come and do like 4 or 5 course wine dinners, and then we'd fly out to like Napa Valley and get to try all the wines. And we'd stay at the wineries and go from place to place, and then we'd come back and we'd do dinners with them, and it was a good time in my life. My wife was in the restaurant business. That's how I met her. So she'd be working, I'd be working, and we didn't have kids until late in life. So at that time we were traveling, going to like beautiful vineyards that had houses like sitting in the middle of the grape fields, and we were treated like rock stars. I mean, it was incredible back then.
Oh yeah.
They don't do that anymore. Like, the companies don't send you out. Like, we used to get sent on trips all over the place. And the margins are so slim and people are making so little money anymore. It's like they don't do it. But like Cisco Food Service and U.S. Food Service, all these like big vendors, they'd fly to Las Vegas.
Oh yeah.
And we had a
It's a lot of
private.
benefits.
We sat in a private concert with Elton John. It was incredible. We sat in a private concert and got to see Jay Leno, the
Oh, wow.
comedian,
Yeah.
which was incredible. And just, crazy trips and fun trips, and they did all this stuff to entertain you, and they also trying to get your business.
Mm-hmm.
Those days are gone. I can't even get a free sample of butter anymore.
That's crazy.
Definitely not the same anymore.
It's
Yeah.
insane. I can't get anything. I'm like, can I get a sample? And they're like, well. I'm like, what do you mean, well?
25 cents.
I was like, how are you wanting me to buy this if you don't not even let me try it?
Exactly.
So it's weird. It's certainly it's hard to make money now. And even through COVID, when COVID kind of like reset everything. Like anything that somebody wanted to get rid of, they got rid of during COVID. So like these huge companies, when they came through, McDonald's did it, Cisco did it.
Mhm.
Nobody knows they did it, but they got rid of all those like little extra things
Right.
that they were trying to draw people in with that cost extra money. They just cleaned house and got rid of it, and they streamlined everything down to like tiny businesses.
Made millions.
Because they don't have to carry as much inventory, they don't have to have as many employees, they don't have to have any of that stuff. Like Cisco, they'd have 30 types of cheddar cheese. Now they have 10.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have 30 types of onion rings. Now they have 3.
Yeah.
They got rid of all of their products so that everybody's buying the same thing. It's hard to be different, unless you're making everything scratch. And,
Yeah.
they got rid of tons of management. So there used to be like 3 area directors. Now there's 1.
It's mostly computers now.
Yeah, and you got to do everything yourself. That pisses me off. Everywhere I go, I'm like, they go, no, you got to do it on the internet. I went to a doctor the other day, and I talked to the receptionist. She goes, the sign-in's over there. And I was like, where? She goes, right there. And it was like, there was 3 computers there, and I had to fill in information for 30 minutes. I was like, isn't this your job?
Wow. Yeah.
And it was like, no, not anymore.
It's all outsourcing of work.
They're making the end user do everything. And I'm like, you're so busy doing all the other people's jobs, you can't work. I tried to get our grill fixed the other day, and she said, go to our website and fill out a request form for service. And I go, what? I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I was like, I go, I just caught you. Can come in. I was like,
she got scared.
yeah, she was like, oh, what's that? I'm astounded. I mean, you go to Walmart, and there's one person checking people out, and there's like a gigantic cattle corral.
Exactly.
And everybody's doing their own work.
Walmart's all self-checkout now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
They have to check themselves out. And then they turned all their kitchens into ghost kitchens.
Yeah.
So like 4 or 5 brands are coming out of one kitchen, and they're just doing DoorDash and Uber and stuff out of there now.
Oh,
But I mean, it's a smart business move by them, to be honest.
It's a smart business move, but you're getting garbage.
But yeah, exactly.
I mean, all the
service.
great things that,
Service
people
is
got
not the
accustomed
same.
to. People are getting used to being served crappy food, and they're getting used to bad service, and they're getting used to it. Like
nothing's
it's okay.
actually good anymore.
Yeah.
Right, it's all average.
So, would you say the uniqueness of the restaurant business, or just any America in general, just went away? Just
I would
businesses
say
here?
that it's never going to go completely away. I mean, there's always going to be people that want to be creative and do great things and make great food. So it's never going to go away. But you normally follow the dollar, and then we did it to an extent too. I mean, we made our menu smaller. We bought robots because we couldn't get employees. We were using robots to help serve food.
Yeah.
We bought a $40,000 grill that can cook a medium rare burger in 42 seconds. Because we couldn't find the talent, we couldn't find the people. So sometimes you're forced into it. But yeah, some of it's going away, and people are trying to just figure out, how do I make money? And sometimes you have to give up a lot of the good stuff that made it so great to get there.
Well, I mean, something unique is that robot you talk to us about. That robot that you got that serves. Well, it's not there now, but serves food.
That's Bella
Bella?
the robot.
Bella.
Yeah.
But she can carry about 10 to 12 plates at a time. A server can only carry 3.
Yeah. It's pretty
3
convenient.
to 4. So when you have large parties and things like that, and
That's
when
a
you're-
favorite.
And do what?
It's a favorite.
Yeah. She comes out and goes to any table you program her to go to. We had to map the entire restaurant.
Yeah.
So like I'm in the kitchen. I don't have to leave the kitchen. I just hit a button and she goes to whatever table. And then when the people take their food off, they hit a button. It comes back.
Mm-hmm. But that'll never take away the job of a waitress.
It doesn't take away. It just helps, especially if you're short-staffed.
Yeah.
It picks up the slack. It's probably the best way to do it. But I'm telling you, in 10 years,
Yeah.
It's all gonna
Do
be
you think-
that.
there's going to be so much automation in the restaurant business. I mean, if you look at, Flippy, the burger flipper or whatever, I mean, um, that thing makes burgers, it makes French fries, it does all that stuff. They have vending machines now that literally you go up and just swipe your credit card, and you hit like I want 3 burgers. It cooks the burger, toasts the bun, puts the cheese on it, puts it in the box, and it
Wow.
comes out a slot at the bottom. There's no people there.
Wow.
And they have pizza machines where it makes the dough in front of you, it rolls it out through a machine, goes into the oven with the toppings, drops onto a box, a cutter cuts it, and it pops out the bottom in 3 minutes. They
That's
have
really scary.
pizza vending machines, and it's fresh made pizza, and it's pretty damn good.
I think that's pretty cool.
It is
I've
cool,
seen it.
but
Yeah.
again, I mean,
But again, it's like taking away your money, right?
it's just the direction of the new world, or
Uh-huh.
the new, whatever. We're all going that direction. So.
Sometimes you think that maybe it would be better to get out of this business and get into the automation stuff, just restaurant.
Should have gone to work for Amazon.
Yeah.
Worked my way up there, I'd be killing it right now.
What actually, talking about Amazon, what were some good investments that you made early on that have helped this?
I have more bad investments than I have
Bad?
good investments. Yes.
Oh.
I think the best investments I ever made was when I invested in the restaurants. We're, you've always heard the term, if you want to make money, you have to spend money, which is just another way of saying you have to take risk. But we've always, one thing that we've done is once we got to the point where we were successful was about our 3rd year or 4th year. We never ever bought another thing unless we could buy it with cash. We never took out another credit card. We never took out a loan. I was like, we will never be a slave to having to pay something back, and not being able to do what's best for the restaurant because we don't have the money because we have to pay a credit card, right? So if something breaks and they're like, oh, we can live without it, or if something needs to be fixed or cleaned or that, you know what I mean? I was like, we don't shortcut anything. So I don't care what the cost is. I'm like, when something happens, as long as we have the money, we buy it, get it fixed, pay for it, move on. And sometimes that kind of hurts a little bit, but we're never making decisions. We're never forced into making a decision because we have debt piled up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a million restaurants where people are like, oh, I can't do that. I can't afford to advertise, or I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to do that. I'm like, yeah, because you spent money when you didn't have it.
Yeah.
I was like, as soon as you start taking out loans and credit cards and debt and stuff on restaurants, you're in pretty bad shape.
So you never had a problem with debt here in this restaurant, or you personally? Or?
Only when we started up.
Okay.
When we started up, we were dirt poor and we were barely making it, but we saved every nickel and penny that we did make.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got to a point where we were paying our bills, we started saving money. So we had this like emergency fund, and then we just never ever we paid all the loans off and never touched another thing of debt again. Like if we buy a car, we don't buy a car unless we can afford to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been pretty fortunate.
Do you think it's smarter for a new entrepreneur or a new somebody that wants to open a restaurant to keep most of their assets in cash or invest it into something, or
Well, no. If you're in the restaurant business, you have to have liquid cash because things go wrong continually. So the restaurant business is has the highest failure rate of almost any business in the world.
Right.
So as far as that goes, if you're going to take a huge risk, but if you're going to invest the money in, then you got to be there and you got to do the time. And if you can stash money, then stash money and hold on to it because something's going to break. It happens constantly, and you're not going to be ready for it. So we always said we were always going to have like $30,000 sitting there for emergencies. So it just sits there. We don't touch it. We don't do anything. It's completely liquid. So if something bad happens to the restaurant, like we had the flood or the hurricane came through,
Mm-hmm.
and all this equipment that was behind it was all ruined.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to rebuild all of it, and that cost us, I think it cost us like $80,000 to rebuild that.
But you had some of that money already.
We had most of it.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And then unfortunately, we had to use some of our own savings, but we didn't take out any debt or credit cards for it. We just
Good.
went back and said, look, we got to fix it, get it done. Yeah, you have to manage your money tight.
Yeah.
And spend it wisely. It's like a lot of people spend ahead, and a lot of people come down here and don't realize that during the off season that you have to give money back. In the months of like July, August, September, we don't make money. We literally lose money every month, but we know that. So we plan for it, and we save up, and then we lose our money, and then we make more during season, then we lose our money, and there's a lot of restaurants that go out of business down here because they're not used to the season. They come down and they're like, wow, this is awesome. I was like, yeah, wait till August.
Well, do you think Naples is a good place for a burger joint?
Yeah, I think Naples is a good place for just about anything. The problem is that nobody can afford to live here. So
Yeah.
workers are the biggest problem. But your clientele, I mean, it's people that have expendable money. There's a lot of cities in the blue collar areas, stuff like that, where people don't go out to eat every night. They don't spend $16 or $18 on a burger. So Naples is a phenomenal place to be if you can afford to be here and live here and afford to be able to open up a business here. Because your target audience, I mean, everybody has expendable money here.
Huh.
This has got to be one of the richest counties in the entire nation.
Definitely.
So yeah, if you got people that don't mind spending $20 on a hamburger and $15 on a glass of wine, then yeah, you can make money.
So it's more like a fine dining here, which is more so. Or?
Well, you just have to charge what you have to charge to make money. I mean, our rent's high, our employee pay is high, utilities are, everything's high, food's high, everything's high. But where we're at, it's very easy for me to turn around and say, I'm sorry, I got to raise our prices because our prices go up, your prices go up. There's a lot of communities in America where you can't do that. You can't raise your price to 16 or 18.
Nobody will buy it.
They'll just stop coming.
Yeah.
So, I think when inflation hit this year, a lot of people got smacked with that, and people are going out to eat less, but not in Naples.
It's a convenient location here because you've got Fifth Avenue right there, and everything's super expensive there. And here you've got a more
Right.
decent,
I can be
decently
expensive and
priced.
still not look expensive because of Fifth Avenue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yes.
It's a great location for you. What about your other location? How does that do?
We have one at Vanderbilt, and it does good. It doesn't do as good as our downtown one, but it does okay. But it's still part of Naples. I mean, they still have a lot of people out there with expendable cash. But the farther north you get, the more you get to the middle class people that go out once a week, not 5 nights a week. But they're doing good, and we had a third restaurant, Logan's Landing, that we sold off, and we're actually licensing that one to a really nice couple. They're doing a great job. So that's nice because that's like pass-through income. We just get paid for the name.
No.
We go out and I meet with him once a month, and we go over what's going on, and then he writes me a check, and I said I'll see you next month.
Yeah.
So, are you thinking of franchising?
We thought of franchising, and we might get back to that point, but I would mentally, at this point, I'm not ready for that. We were actually on the cusp of franchising when COVID hit, and then we had some embezzlement issues, and then we had employee issues, and I was like, this is not the right time to go franchising, because I was like, we're going to open up all these restaurants and not have people to work, and we're quality people.
Yeah.
And I said, like, how are we going to control it? How are we going to run the restaurant so everything's great and everything's, to build it? So we put that on hold, but we'll probably do. We've talked about it several times. We got really close to doing it right when COVID hit. We were just about ready to do a franchise. But at the moment, we're just kind of sitting tight and watching. The economy is kind of shaky right now. Everybody thought it was going to come back really strong by right now, and it hasn't. It's not horrible, but it's not great. I think when inflation starts coming down and people start feeling a little relief, that things are going to start growing again. But I mean, Naples is an exception to the rule. I mean, the building that's going on in this town is insane.
Oh my gosh.
Condos and restaurants
Oh, yeah.
and condos, and I mean, it's just
Keeps
unbelievable.
expanding.
Everywhere now.
But the problem is you have to get employees here, so that's the hardest part.
And if the living expense is too much, then
Yeah,
people are not going to work.
A cheap place down here is $2,000 a month.
Crazy.
That's for like a one-bedroom
still- yeah.
apartment.
Up north, those are insane prices. Those are prices for like very like expensive areas.
Yeah, in Kansas City, Missouri, shit, I go up there for $2,000 a month and live in a mansion.
Best place, yeah. You ran out a mansion up there. Do you think it's gonna be like? Do you think it's gonna be a problem when you try to expand the fact that you were talking about of people with not as much expendable cash?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not an economist, so I don't really know, but I don't see things getting any better for another year or two. And again, I mean, there's so many issues that are out on the table right now with the American people. It's like when you go to vote, you don't know who to vote for because what's important to you. You know, and then some people just vote along a party line, whether they know what the person is doing or not. And we've become so divided. It's like how do you make things better when you can't get anything done? You know, I'm not saying one's right or not. I'm just saying when you're that divided that you can't make a decision or you can't move forward, it's like you're not going to be successful. So I'm a little worried about the future, but especially for my kids.
And when do you plan to expand? Would you say this business?
We're gonna wait until the inflation comes down. They're still raising interest rates, and they're talking that this will probably be the last interest rate, and then they think it'll start going down after this one. So I think when that happens, that's when you're going to feel a lot of relief and a lot of people that are starting to spend money again. Right now, people are scared.
Yeah.
They're holding on to their money.
Do you keep most of your money in the bank or in liquid?
No, we put it into either investments or, you know, we set them aside money for our kids for college. Liquid money doesn't do anything. You actually lose money because the price or the value of the dollar has gone down. So you have to have it somewhere where it's always moving up. So I try to keep nothing liquid.
All right. So so instead of liquid, do you keep most of your money like here in the business? So your assets, your net worth is mostly the Brooks Burgers?
We pay debt down. So like,
what is that?
And I mean personal debt, like our house and our, you know, anything that you can get away from interest, like if you have an interest on your house, right?
Right.
So we put all of our money towards our house, you know, because real estate's a great investment.
Okay.
So we put in intangible assets that aren't going to devalue. I'm not talking about like cars and stuff. I'm talking about like our house, like real estate. And then we have a little retirement fund set up that hopefully by the time I'm 70 years old, I'll be able to retire.
Yeah.
And then we put money into college accounts for our kids because that's non-taxable, you know, and I'd like my kids to be able to be one of the, you know, it's kind of a luxury to be able to graduate school and not have debt.
Yeah.
So if that's one of my big goals is I want my kids to go to school and I want them to graduate and be able to go, you know, they're going to have to take care of themselves. I'm not going to give them anything, but I'd like them to not have to spend the first 10 years of their first job paying back college debt.
Right.
You know, it's a pretty big hurdle to overcome.
Do you want one of your kids to take over the restaurant?
Absolutely not.
No. And yeah, actually to finish it off, do you ever plan on selling Brooks Burgers?
If the right offer was made, yeah, we'd sell Brooks Burgers. But right now, it's a good income for us and a good lifestyle, and it's less stressful than working for someone else.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have the freedom of, hey, if I want the day off, I want to go play golf. I'm going to go play golf.
Exactly. Hey man, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Have us back anytime.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll share some more of those crazy stories with you.
Of course, yeah.
There's probably a few on there probably not appropriate, but
if you want, you can kind of shout yourself out the restaurant,
you need
the
to come
location.
down. Excuse me. You need to come down to Brooks Burgers. We're the best burger joint in America. If you don't believe it, look on TripAdvisor. Look at our Google review. But we'll treat you like family when you come down. That's what's made us successful is treating everybody like they're a family member. So.
Yeah.
And we're not perfect. When we mess up, we fix it. That's the biggest thing.
Well, we appreciate all the wisdom and the stories.
Yep. Thank you very much.
I held back on the good ones. I'll tell you those when the camera's
well,
on.
next time, yeah. Well, thank you for watching the Lobby Rats podcast. It's been our first episode. See you next time.
Yep. This is Ryan, Sebastian, Got Dominic in the
Dominic.
back.
And
Show your
Brooks
face,
Burgers.
Dom. And Brooks Burger.
Brooks Burgers.
All right.